the opportunity to better understand the scale in which we work. I'm happy to start this discussion with Etienne Rodari. He will be kicking off with a few ideas in terms of how it is that we better manage marine areas and at what scale we should be operating. Etienne.
Thank you very much. When I was asked to have the three different keywords put on the screen, I first thought about history. And the reason why I thought this term was important is that I had the feeling that for some reason this whole group of people working on MPAs somehow is overlooking the very long history that we already have on protected areas that are land-based. And drawing from that background, learning from that history, I think is extraordinary opportunity for us to find, ways in this kind of new kind of politics on the ocean, and is also not to repeat the mistakes we've done. So that, I think, was one of the keywords I wanted to stress. And having said that, history would, I think, have some how can I say, would have some impact on the way we think about MPAs and the size of MPAs at the ocean level.
Thank you. My mother's a history teacher, and the one thing she taught me is what we don't actually do is learn from history. We keep on making the same mistakes, but maybe we can break this and change that bad habit. So John Day, you run MPA News, and you're based out of Washington State, University of Seattle. Can you tell us a little bit about the scales and, perhaps that small is in fact beautiful and not just big is beautiful?
Thanks. Well, first of all, I spend a lot more time interviewing people about MPAs than talking about them myself. So there's an element of the tables being turned on this occasion. But I'll try to draw from my years of reporting on the field to impart whatever I can to this conversation. I report on all sizes of MPAs, and certainly the optimal size of any MPA is dependent on the goals for that site. But certainly a point that's been raised many times at this conference is that if your goals are to have your MPA be community-based, have community support, if you wanted to address the habitats that are at most risk often, the nearshore habitats, the ones that have sustained the most use from people, from communities, then you're probably going to want to focus on small MPAs, nearshore MPAs, and there's a tremendous need for those in the MPA field, even though large MPAs can certainly have an element of glamour. And in terms of reaching IEG Target 11, that's going to have to be done on the backs of large MPAs when you do the math in order to reach the scale that's necessary. But small MPAs, in order to have an impact on conserving these inshore environments that are under threat, they're going to be essential.
So, is the real question big is beautiful? We're going to turn thirdly to a representative for Big Ocean. In the type of work that you've been doing, what have you sort of seen as the key challenges, Dan Wagner, when it comes to understanding the dynamics of large systems and how they actually are important to protect?
So I'd first like to just say that I am a scientist, so I'll bring a little bit of the science perspective, and I work for Papahanaumokuakea, which is still the largest marine protected area in the United States, and for a long time was the largest in the world. In terms of from a science perspective, these places are really offer some very important research opportunities. They act as natural laboratories. We have far less impacts, man-made impacts, things like pollution, sediment runoff, a lot of these things that affect most coastal and places or smaller MPAs are less prevalent in large MPAs. So it really, from a science perspective, it allows us to study things in the absence of many of the stressors that we have. So it really gives some very unique research opportunities. But in terms of protecting places, because they are removed and are relatively pristine, they do a better job at protecting some things like entire ecosystems, entire species. We have less impacts.
Well, but isn't it the fact that, you know, humans are pretty much everywhere, and these places are there because there's the only places people haven't gone, and presumably the reason we haven't gone there is there wasn't that much to take in the first place. Otherwise we would be raping and pillaging there like everywhere else. So, I mean, aren't they actually going to be misrepresentative of what we have, the real ocean and the real productive systems? Aren't we going to end up with oligotrophic, sort of nutrient-poor areas with not that much productivity that actually in some ways are irrelevant in the larger scheme of things?
So yeah, that brings up the question of what do you want to protect? And I'd say that one of the big arguments, and unfortunately this is one of the things that us as humans, we look at the oceans as our primary source of food. And this is one of the big roles of these large MPAs, is because they are pristine and because we can close them out, and therefore these places can act as refugia where we aggregate abundance. And hopefully that will then spill over to more populated areas in the vicinity.
And Etienne, I mean, you're skeptical to this whole idea of having these big MPAs. I mean, and you know, why not actually manage the ecosystem as a whole? So can you tell us your perspective on that?
Yeah, well, my idea is that if you look at the current trends in ocean policies or governance, not only you see the scramble to MPAs that we are talking about, but you also see the scramble to resources. And this, between the two scrambles, I don't know which one will win eventually. And my concern is about this focus on MPAs, while other people are focusing on other kind of exploitation of the ocean. And this kind of tricky situation might not be effectively a good output for conservation policies at a whole. So my concern is about this focus on land-based, area-based, territorial kind of management, forgetting the rest, so to say, the rest which is happening at the same moment in different other parts. So I know that we are now looking at, you know, planning at the ecosystem level, or looking at the IPSAS and so on. But still, we have to look and we have to think about the whole system of the ocean worldwide in order to be able to assess the conservation policies versus other kind of exploitations. And that, I think, cannot be missed in any ways. And that is, by the way, something that was missed on land for the last few decades.
So what you're basically saying is we're staring ourselves blind within the fence of where our little MPA is, but we're missing the bigger picture. And in fact, the rest of the world is moving and we're not moving with it. John Davis, do you see this is actually true? I mean, do you recognize this criticism? Do you think it's fair?
I think that it's a noble idea. If I understand your position correctly, would you support 100% of the ocean being open to fishing, but as long as that fishing were done in a very conservation-conscious way, done very sustainably?
Can I answer?
Sure.
Yeah, well, yeah. Ideally, it would be the kind of system, but I'm not to that point right now, obviously, and we are not to that point right now. What I just want to stress is the fact that maybe looking and focusing on MPAs is the proof of our inability to work somewhere else and to deal with other kind of big issues that are like, you know, mining exploitation, industrial fishing, and so on. And looking at the ocean, which and especially high seas compared to lands where people live and people work and so on, I think we have an opportunity to actually handle all the kind of sectoral issues all together, to work together to do something that could actually change, not on the side, not on specific places, but at the more systemic and global level.
So Dan, do you recognize yourself in this description?
So yeah, I think I totally agree that we cannot forget about managing resources in the places that are non-MPA, but I think that MPAs can actually help the management of resources in outside areas. In fact, MPAs, as I mentioned, are some of the most pristine, especially large MPAs who have some of the most pristine ecosystems there. And by looking at these, it gives us a little bit of a baseline. It gives us an idea of how systems should look like when you remove humans from the equation. So it gives us kind of a target to what we should ideally strive towards. If we just go diving in harbors or in places that are heavily degraded, you might think that, well, that should be, everywhere should be like that. But if we dive in places where you don't have many of these stressors, you get an idea of, well, ecosystems should look like that if you remove humans from the equation, and hopefully how ecosystems could look like if we manage our resources properly. So I think that MPAs can actually help in managing resources in non-MPA areas.
I guess one way of formulating it is that you will never know how to get there if you don't know where you want to go. And so that it's very easy to get confused when it comes to what is a natural ecosystem. I think we all refer to this shifting baseline. The first place you ever went into the ocean is sort of where you thought the world should look like, and the older you get, and I'm maybe the oldest one already in this panel, the more you can actually sense that things have changed so much during these years, and it's going to be really, really hard to get back to where we used to be. Now, looking at some of the other aspects here, this idea of different types of scales and what is actually optimizing. So, John, you had an idea working to do the right scale for the right problem, and how do you actually want to explain that to us?
Well, I mean, as I described, I mean, there are some things that smaller nearshore MPAs are better at doing. You get at it's easier to get at the more degraded nearshore environments that have been heavily impacted by humans, as opposed to the offshore, more pristine environments that a lot of the big MPAs go after. Just one quick point I'd like to make about large MPAs and Aichi Target 11, which I mentioned earlier. When you do the math, so we're at 3% coverage now. We want to get to 10% in 7 years. To give you a sense of the scale that we're dealing with, the median-sized MPA as of a year or two ago was less than 2 square kilometers. So in order to get from 3% to 10% in 7 years, if we only used those median-sized MPAs, it would take 11.5 million median-sized MPAs to get to the 10% goal, which may be possible if we really, put our minds to it. But as opposed to large MPAs, for example, the Coral Sea MPA in Australia, which is 1 million square kilometers, if you wanted to go from where we are now, 3% to 10% in 7 years, using only large MPAs that are 1 million square kilometers, it would take 23 of those. So, like I said, to get to Aichi Target 11, just for that sliver of the target that deals with that percentage, and not dealing with representativity, not dealing with the issue of other effective conservation measures, but only that percentage, it's going to have to be done on the backs of MPAs, or large MPAs. So that's certainly, I think that is a driver and a goal for some of these, some of the organizations that are championing large MPAs. It certainly makes it a lot easier to get to that goal and have a chance at 2020.
Yeah, but some people sort of argue that this is a cheap cop-out, that it's a way of a lot of particularly ex-colonial or colonial nations to get off the hook, to not do the work they need to do here in Europe, but instead set aside places where no one lives. I'm understood that about 2% of the world's ocean is British overseas territories with less than 1,500 people in. Now, in some ways, that's great if we could protect that, but it is in some ways not really dealing with the day-to-day management issues, and I think that's to your point here. So, I mean, how would you argue against that? Is that not really true?
It's a very legitimate argument. You can also, I think 2 weeks ago, there was the World Wilderness Conference in Salamanca, and I think it probably, there would have been a slightly different conversation there, where there's much more realization of the value of wilderness, and that is, probably could be argued an ecosystem service in itself, at least in a way.
Dan, what's your point on this?
Yeah, I'm just going to state the thing I said before, that we can't forget about managing the resources that are close to where people are, as well as those that are far away, and ideally both of those would work in tandem. That way protect large areas where we can protect many species and entire ecosystems, without forgetting those resources that are closer to human people, and ideally those two work in tandem.
And looking at the big ocean ones that the Bush administration left behind, I mean, one of them, the Marianas Trench, is actually not protecting the whole water column. Some people are arguing now that we should, create and take whatever we can. We've heard examples from Mexico here, for example, arguing that we need to have a protection on the bottoms, and that's what's politically feasible, but we in some ways should take the big battle later on. But yet we know that a lot of the productivity is in the surface layers, and without the big fish and the whales, not so much actually lands on the bottom. So these are essentially starved system, and if you can take out 90% of the biomass, you have a much poorer system on the bottom than you used to have. So you have to argue yourself, is that actually managing it? Maybe then it would be better to look at the whole ecosystem management and look at it from that perspective than have a semi-mediocre MPA that doesn't actually do the trick. I mean, do you have a view on this? I mean, you've obviously thought a lot about this topic.
Well, I'm not specialized in this kind of issue, but I think you make one example of this very difficult relationship between the MPA and the rest. And coming back to this target of 10%, you basically have three options. One is that we don't reach the 10% in 2020, which is very likely to happen, but maybe Max Padling and his colleagues were mentioning that maybe we will actually get there. The second option is that we got to 10%, but with poor governance, no enforcement, no compliance, and then we're going to, have the same kind of issue that we know already. And then the other problem, and the other option would be like 10% with good governance, good compliance, enforcement, and so on. But given the connectivity of the seas, these 10% will include almost everybody working, living, and using the sea. So we will have, in any case, if we want to get to 10%, we will need the complete world working on the seas to comply and to agree on this 10% because of that connectivity, because of the freedom of the sea, because of the ecological and biological connectivity. So there's no way for us to say we're going to protect 10% and we'll forget about the rest. If we want to get to 10% with real enforcement and compliance, then we have to think about everybody agreeing on these kind of issues.
So Dan, isn't it really splendid isolation can still work? I mean, there is this opportunity to put aside some of these areas out there, and you can actually do a really, really good job. I mean, maybe you don't actually have to be connected everywhere. Is this really a true argument?
Things are connected in many ways that we don't even understand. The large MPAs, the big advantage of them is that they, in many cases, they include the boundaries of these movements. So in terms of the movements of species, but even so, even the largest MPAs cannot completely encompass entire circulation patterns. So even though they might be very big, you still have stuff from the outside coming in. In our MPA in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, we have a lot of problems with marine debris, with problems coming out from the outside. So yeah, due to connection, we have to manage the entire world as a whole.
So if we can't get everyone to do the right thing, we're doomed. Is that what we're saying? I mean, that sounds a little bit sort of pessimistic also. I still want to believe that we can do it right in a few places, show the rest of the world it actually works, and then get a momentum going from there. But maybe I'm wrong. John, what's your view?
Well, I think what Etienne just said a few minutes ago was a call to arms, and to some extent, this conversation reminds me of what I've heard from Dan LaFoley and from Mark Spalding and from some other folks in the past year, that we've been talking a lot about 10%, but why aren't we also talking about the 90% or about the 100%? And we really have to be mindful of the entirety of the oceans, not just be completely focused, as we often are on MPAs, and is easy to allow to happen just because there are so many things that we have to get our minds around and challenges to overcome in this field. It will be really hard to do. I mean, there are so many challenges. It will take an enormous effort and a lot of people around the world coming together to address all these challenges. But we have to keep working on it, and MPAs are part of it. They're a very important tool, I think, increasingly valuable, multifunctional tool that you can accomplish a lot of things with, depending on your goals, whether it's fisheries management or protecting inshore ecosystems or wilderness. But all the other aspects of ocean management are also part of the toolbox that we need to be applying at the same time.
So Etienne, when I hear you talk, I mean, I get this feeling that, in some ways you're not really convinced by the MPA argument. You feel it's a bit of a sideshow, and in some ways we're missing the main point. On the other hand, we clearly have a situation where, as we said, we need some reference points so we can get back to where a healthy system is. And if we don't know what a healthy system looks like, we're not going to get there, right? And I also sometimes feel people coming from the fisheries angle somehow want everything to be degraded, because then they can say, well, we're dealing with modified systems. And if you have healthy systems, you actually see how dramatically different they are, that it's not even funny to see. And I think we have numerous examples of the fact that the whole trophic system looks completely different in unimpeded system. And to me, it's very hard to understand why you wouldn't want to have a few beacons of hope and light out there that actually showcase it. But can you make a convincing case for why we don't need hope in the ocean?
Well, what I think, coming to, I'm a social scientist, and I've been looking at history in conservation policies. And what you can say is that a PA or MPA, for that matter, is always something which connects not only different kind of organisms, ecosystems, but it's also a result of our own way of dealing with things, with matters, and it's a way to be away from the rest of the society. It's a defensive way to deal with the rest of the society. If we want to be mainstream, we'll have maybe to change ourselves as conservationists, and we'll have to change the other people. So this is a very, very long-term kind of goal. But in the same time, I think if we keep on going into MPAs, whatever their size, we will have this inability to actually reach something, not only like on very specific issues, but like a broader kind of view of how to live in that world, encompassing everything, including conservation, but also all other kind of activities, or other kind of sectors, other kind of way of seeing the world. And so that would be my point, in case for critically, but in terms of like a realistic and optimist way to deal with MPAs.
I'm not sure if I totally follow you, but I mean, one way of looking at it is a bit like historic sort of revisionism. We were actually looking at rewriting history as you go along, and you redefine what you used to have. And at some level, you're trying to explain why we came to where we were. And then you're mapping out a future which either is very idealistic, which we won't reach, or I think it's too realistic, or basically you're setting your goals so low, that we're essentially setting ourselves for failure. I mean, that's what I hear here. But maybe I'm obviously part of the people that you're worried about. So I don't know. Do you guys have a reaction to this?
I think that there need to be parts of the ocean where the human footprint is just not present, or not heavily present. That there are undisturbed parts of the ocean. I think that there should be some allowance for wilderness there, however you define wilderness. I think that there was a comment last night by the new IUCN ambassador, or WCPA ambassador, William Winram. He was talking after his shark film, and he said that humans aren't the only stakeholders. That sharks are stakeholders too, and whales, and coral reefs, and so on. And that's not necessarily a point that I bring up in MPA News. It's not a point that I make, and maybe it's kind of an animal rights view getting into the MPA field, but I think there's something to be said for and not even getting into the value of wilderness areas as control sites. But there's something to be said for leaving parts of the ocean without the heavy footstep of people.
It's fair to say that most of us have a very anthropocentric worldview, and maybe it's good once in a while to at least step out of that a little bit. Well, we're getting to the end of this, so maybe I'll give you all a chance to say, what's your big message from this week? Where do you feel you've learned something, or what's the greatest thing you can do next week to really improve on the way we manage the oceans? So Etienne, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, what my feeling is that the will is very strong for conservation and MPAs, and in the same time the political will is somehow missing in the way that we can define the future and define the goal that we want to stress for the next few years. So political will is at the end of the day something that will obviously be the most important thing when it comes to implementing something on the ground.
John.
Well, a preview of the next MPA News, I guess, is that a couple of the big topics that I've heard a lot about this week that I wasn't necessarily expecting to hear that much about are biodiversity offsets, which I think is a really exciting topic that hasn't received a lot of attention in the MPA field yet, but has an awful lot of promise for different aspects of MPA management and even financing. And then the whole idea of certifications, which may not be tremendously exciting for the MPA management field because it will, bring some, it'll require some time for applying for such certifications like the Green List, but a tremendously powerful tool that I think is an important step in the management effectiveness evaluation movement.
Dan.
One of the key messages I've seen over and over in the sessions I've attended this week is the lack of capacity we have, and this is a big problem. The future of marine resource management, we have tremendous challenges here. Academia, universities appear to be not producing the managers we need in the future, and so the agencies that work with MPAs and people that work in marine resource management need to basically include the younger generations into their programs, include strong education and outreach components in their daily activities, and really spread the message of how important it is to protect and love our oceans.
Thank you. Well, I won't try to summarize the discussion, which I think was rich and frank. What I would say is it's quite clear that we will continue to work at scale. It's also quite clear that there will be lots of skeptics out there. I think we're very good, and I think this meeting has proved that we can certainly preach to the choir in a very meaningful, good way. I think we can learn a lot more from ourselves interchanging, but that we do need to go out in the rest of society and get connected, as Etienne has told us. I also think it's fair to say that as a community, we've made some very significant progress. I'm very proud to be associated with this event. I particularly want to thank the French MPA agency now that I have the stage. I would also want to say that as a community, we're actually good at having fun, and this is one of the great things about our community. So on this happy note, I would thank the speakers for today and all of you coming here and the other speakers of the week. Thank you.